Okay, good afternoon, everyone. I wanted to take this moment to wish everyone a happy Yom HaAtzma'ut, a Yom HaAtzma'ut Sameach, of course, Israel's Independence Day. And today we're visiting with Emmy nominee Molly-Ann Leikin. And I'm excited to talk to her about her special contribution to HaTikvah. But I wanted to start off with a little bit of a history of Yom HaAtzma'ut. Yom HaAtzma'ut is, of course, Independence Day, Israeli Independence Day, and it is founded on the declaration of the establishment of the State of Israel by the Jewish leadership headed by what was then future Prime Minister David Ben-Gurion, and on the 14th of May, 1948. And so the independence was declared 8 hours before the end of the British Mandate of Palestine, which was due to finish on the 15th of May. And the mood was quite festive. The Jews of Palestine were dancing because they were about to realize what was one of the most remarkable and inspiring achievements in human history. A people that had been exiled from its homeland for 2,000 years before, which had endured countless pogroms and expulsions and persecutions, but which had really refused to relinquish its identity. And actually, on the contrary, substantially strengthened that identity. And a people with only a few years, which only a few years before had been the victim of humankind's largest single act of mass murder, the Holocaust, killing a third of the world's Jews. That people was now returning home as sovereign citizens in their own independent state. So that's a little bit of the history there. There's much more to it. It's the tip of the iceberg, of course. But let's move on to the meat of the matter here today, HaTikvah. HaTikvah is, of course, Israel's national anthem, and it's actually a 19th century Jewish poem, literally meaning the hope. The theme reflects the Jews' 2,000-year-old hope of returning to the land of Israel, restoring it, and reclaiming it as a free and sovereign nation. The lyrics were adapted from an 1877 poem called Tikvatenu, Our Hope, by Naftali Hertzimber, a Jewish poet from Zlochev, Ukraine. And an adapted version called HaTikvah was chosen in 1897 as the anthem of the First Zionist Congress. So when the State of Israel was established in 1948, HaTikvah was actually unofficially proclaimed the national anthem. It wasn't until 2004, November, that our current shortened version, an edited version, was sanctioned by the Knesset. And it now contains just the first verse and one first stanza and one refrain of the original poem. And the reason for that is that largely the rest of it was deemed fulfilled by the founding of the State of Israel. So that's a little bit about the lyrics, and we're going to hear those shortly, of course. It's probably our duty to hear HaTikvah and sing HaTikvah on Yom HaAtzma'ut. I'm going to talk a little bit about the history of the music. It's a little bit hard to discern exactly what the origins are, but what we think of the Jewish melody actually dates back to the 17th century, and its roots are supposedly Italian. Now, again, anyone you hear describing the history of HaTikvah, you're going to hear a different story, because nobody really knows for sure. But we found that Italian composer Giuseppino Del Biado in 1616 is credited with the tune in his song La Montanova, which initially appeared in print in his year 1600 collection of madrigals. And it was later known as Ballo di Mantova. And then the haunting melody spread throughout Europe under various titles. I'm not going to try and pronounce them. Polish and Italian and German and so forth. And it was the basis for, and this is the part of the story that I think most people would agree with, the basis for Czechoslovakian composer Bedřich Smetana's symphonic poem celebrating Bohemia as Die Moldau, or sometimes known as the Moldova. So generally, Samuel Cohen is credited with the 1888 adaptation of the melody we now know as HaTikvah. But even there's some dispute with some crediting Nissen Belzer, and the origin has been also, some people think it's based on liturgical sources such as the Sephardi Hallel of the 17th century. Some people say Tfilat Tal, the prayer for rain. And then, as we said, Samuel Cohen said it was based upon the Moldovan Romanian folk song he had heard as a child. So if we accept the prevailing thinking, that's probably the story closest to reality. And in fact, each of the various musical derivatives, including HaTikvah, shares many structural similarities to La Montanova. So what we're going to do just before we get into a discussion with Molly-Ann, we'll hear HaTikvah. So I'm going to share my screen for that and play HaTikvah. And if you feel like rising for the national anthem, you could do that. You don't have to here. And I'll share that now. Kolot baleva pnima, nefesh Yehudi homia, ulfatei mizrach kadima, ayin metzion Sophia. Od labda tikvatenu, HaTikvah bachnot albayim, liotan chofshi be'atzeinu, et Zion Yerushalayim. Liotan chofshi be'atzeinu, et Zion Yerushalayim.
Bravo. Is that you singing?
Yeah.
Oh my God, what a gorgeous voice you have.
Oh, thank you very much.
My God.
I appreciate that. So actually, I'm glad you're there, and I'm glad you're with us. I'd like to introduce you. So my guest today is Santa Barbara-based Molly-Ann Leikin, storied songwriter, author, music marketing consultant, Emmy nominee for outstanding achievement in music and lyrics, and former Bat Mitzvah alumna of Agudath Israel, one of KBI's legacy congregations. Molly-Ann wrote an English language lyric for HaTikvah, and I'd love to share that with our community today and anyone else watching far and wide on Yom HaAtzma'ut. So Molly, welcome home to KBI, at least virtually.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
So before we get started, Molly, you said you would like to dedicate this podcast, this live stream. So if you'd like to do that now.
Yes, I'd like to dedicate it to my best friend growing up, Jackie Parody Lamont, who just died of lung cancer.
I'm sorry for your loss.
And she had come to services with me a few times during our childhood, and she was just in awe of the synagogue, and she enjoyed being there. And she promised me she'd come with me today to be here. And so she's here in spirit.
Lovely. I wish you good memories and long life.
Thank you. Thank you. That's a lovely thing to say.
So, Molly, tell us about your professional journey in general and what keeps you busy. What makes you tick?
Well, we started 303 Island Park Drive, where my family lived. And after I graduated from college, somebody in the dorm, who was actually Lolly Resminski, who was the daughter of the Secretary of the Treasury of Canada, she taught me how to play the baritone ukulele, much to the chagrin of everybody in my dorm. And when I got home after graduating, and I had no ambition to do anything. I didn't want to be a teacher. I didn't want to be a nurse. I didn't really want to be a wife. So what was there in those days left to do? So I'm sitting in my father's garden and I'm playing my baritone ukulele. He comes storming down the hill. Do you mean to tell me that I sent you to the University of Toronto so that you could sit here and make that racket for the rest of your life? And I said, yeah, that's pretty much it. So somehow they found $500 and shipped me off to Israel to learn the value of hard work on a kibbutz. And everybody else in my group, which was like the Peace Corps, they were all shipped to the Negev. But God needed me in Ashkelon on the Mediterranean coast. And my job was to teach English to immigrant Moroccan children who had just arrived and thought that a toilet was a place to make pickles. So I'm supposed to teach English to these people, and they had no interest in learning I said, she said, he said. So I taught them songs, and then they were happy. When the year was over, a friend from California invited me to visit. I did, and I stayed. And eventually I wiggled my way into being a staff writer for 3 different publishing companies in LA. And I was suddenly getting paid to make all that noise for the rest of my life. And I was very, very lucky. I mean, it didn't hurt that I had a lot of chutzpah. And I wrote a lot of themes and songs for TV and movies, including Violet, that won an Oscar. And I've also become a consultant to developing artists all over the world. And I Zoom private consultations with all of them. That's my up to the HaTikvah story.
Perfect.
So do you want to talk more about?
I do. I want to talk about HaTikvah. What's your fascination with HaTikvah? What was it that?
Well,
that
first of all, the melody, no matter who wrote it, it's a magnificent melody. And you get goosebumps even if you didn't know it was the national anthem of Israel. It's always been beautiful. Most people who sing it have no idea what they're singing. They get the gist of it, but they have no real idea. And I got very sick. I had been very healthy all my life, active, climbed mountains, played tennis, walked across England, the whole deal. And one morning I'm out for my walk along the beach and I had this excruciating pain in my foot. And I saw every doctor in Santa Barbara. Nobody had any clue what it was. And I lost my home, I lost my businesses, and I was living in my car. And on my birthday, an old friend from Hebrew school called me out of the blue. I hadn't heard from her in 40 years. She heard what was going on. She arranged for me to go to Cedar Sinai in LA, and I had been misdiagnosed. And the bottom line is there was a very simple surgery to fix it. So as I was lying there recovering from surgery, the only radio station I could get in my car was the classical one. And I kept hearing the melody for HaTikvah. And I thought, now that's interesting. Why aren't they singing it? Why are they just playing it? Anyway, some words kept floating around. I said, don't be stupid. You're not going to write. You're not going to rewrite the Israeli national anthem. Anyway, on my way into surgery, I promised God that if he healed me, I would do something with my gifts to help the Jewish community at large. So he did, and I did. And I wrote this lyric. And I tried to come as close as possible to the Hebrew lyric. But when you write from one language to another, you can never it's not a translation, it's a lyric. Anyway, I got a group of very wonderful people. The producer who produced the track, Cantor Childs from Santa Barbara, who sang the original recording, everybody just did their very best work, and I am thrilled with this recording, and I'm more than honored, Cantor, that you're going to sing it for us today in English.
Well, I'm honored to have this opportunity to sing it. So we're going to share those lyrics shortly. We're going to share the music shortly. But can you tell me? Let's get into a little bit more about the inspiration for the words, because as you said, it's not a translation of HaTikvah. Speaking about the 2000. We do mention the 2,000-year-old's dream and hope and so forth. But there's something going on that's even more relevant today, something that children and adults alike, I feel, can really connect with this. These words are meaningful and powerful, but in a different way than sort of the more austere original translation might have been. Tell me more about your lyrics.
Well, I write love songs, and I write love songs for the folks. I don't write for the people who go to the opera. I love them, but I don't write for them. I don't write for the people who are intellectuals. I write for the folks, and I write from my heart. Now, I have stood on every inch of Israel at one time during the year I was there. So I have a special connection. Aside from the trees that I planted, when I was a kid, I used to bring a nickel from home, and the nickel bought a leaf on a tree, and when the tree was full, then I had a tree in the David Weiss Forest. I think the whole place is called the David Weiss Forest, but that's another story. So it just seemed to me that this was a very contemporary message. And it wasn't just for the Jews, because Israel stands for, their doors are open to anybody who needs a home, right? So those were my thoughts. And I kept imagining whole congregations of people singing this, and I was crying as I was writing it. So I knew I was doing a good job.
Right. Yes. You can't inspire people emotionally if you're not yourself inspired emotionally.
Right.
That's right. So your lyrics, you wrote these lyrics, and again, these we're setting up the moment where we hear them and let them come into our beings. But before we get to that point, tell our audience your English lyrics caught the eye and ear of Zubin Mehta, the former music director of the IPO, the Israeli Philharmonic Orchestra. How did that transpire? How did that come about?
Well, it wasn't that it caught the ear. I went after it. It so happened right after the song was recorded here by Cantor Childs that the IPO was visiting Santa Barbara. And I bought a ticket, and I bought the most expensive ticket so I could go to the party afterwards. And there he was. And fortunately, I knew some people in the LA Phil, which he had conducted earlier, and I kind of schmoozed my way. And I introduced myself and said I'd written the English lyric. At first, he was horrified because you don't change HaTikvah. HaTikvah is HaTikvah. And I said, well, I think you'll be very pleased with this. And I slipped the CD into the pocket of his tuxedo. 6 months later, now I was following up with email. 6 months later, I got a call saying, the maestro really loves your lyric. And while he can't play it in Israel because only the Hebrew words can be sung there, but when the IPO is on tour, they'll be happy to include it in their repertoire. So that's a pretty good facsimile.
Fantastic. So you then went, to be able to do this, you had to go about producing an audio file to share. Tell us about the production of this audio clip, because it was a little bit of a fun story.
Well, the track was cut in Los Angeles by Richard Friedman. He did the whole thing on his computer, and it sounds like a symphony orchestra. Then we brought it to Santa Barbara, and Mark Castleman who was the recording engineer, and Cantor Childs did the vocal. Then I wanted to have a female version, so we sent the track back to LA, and at Ted Perlman's studio, Michelle Mai Carriere did the female vocal. Now everybody else was Jewish, not that you have to be to sing, but Michelle happened to be Chinese and Japanese, but her roommate was Jewish, and she had more chuz than I did. And so she did it in one take. You heard it. She did the background vocals, and it's gorgeous. And if I ever get to rock and roll heaven and God says, "What did you do with your life?" I'd hand him the CD. I'm very proud of it.
Right.
And I'm glad I had a chance to do that, because it's the only thing I've ever written that wasn't written for money.
Mm-hmm. Right. And last night was the piece's premiere performance in Santa Barbara, and Cantor Childs at Congregation B'nai B'rith did a Zoom concert at 7 o'clock last night, your time. How did that go? How was that? How did that feel?
It was fabulous. I just wish I could have been there.
Right.
It's so much. It's nice to have a Zoom, but it would be nice to have been in the room. Just like today, I wish I were there.
Yeah, of course. We wish you were here too. You're right. So the original plan was for you to come in for this Shabbat, and the choir would have been on the bima singing your lyrics at the end of services, and we would have you do a little bit of a talk. I like to look for the silver linings in this time of COVID, because this format gave us an even better way to reach not only our congregation but the whole world, and this is obviously to be shared and spread wide and far and wide, and really we get more time together. So that's really I'm very pleased about that. Is there anything else you'd like to add before we go to the singing of your song?
Well, I'd like to shout out to everybody I used to know. Hopefully some of my colleagues from Hebrew School are in your congregation today. And I have a picture right here of Purim, our Purim festival when I was 5 years old. There's me, Penny Goldman, Janet Mijakovsky, Susan Bloom, Malcolm Luby, Brian Eleven, and Mel, somebody whose surname I can't remember.
All right. So if anyone remembers Mel's last name, let us know.
Yeah, call in. Be among the first 5 callers.
Yes, but unfortunately, because of the technical difficulties, we're not live on Facebook at the moment. This is a recording, but everyone is free to post a comment when it is up. So if you know of that person's last name, Mel's last name, that would be great. So we're going to conclude by presenting your version of HaTikvah. I'm going to share my screen, so bear with me a moment. Here we go. As our souls are singing, we can see the hope of Israel shine in you and me. Standing together now as one, free in Jerusalem, we're smiling in the sun. Feel the hope that's rising everywhere. Feel our song become an answered prayer for our sisters and brothers, as we stand with all of them in our homeland, Jerusalem. As our souls are singing, we can see the hope of Israel shine in you and me. And after 2,000 years alone, here in Jerusalem, we are finally home. Feel the hope that's rising everywhere. Feel our song become an answered prayer for our sisters and brothers, as we stand with all of them in our homeland, Jerusalem. For our sisters and brothers, as we stand with all of them in our homeland, Jerusalem.
Bravo.
Thank you, and thank you so much for sharing that with us. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. There we go. So thank you so much for sharing that with us. I'm excited that this is going to be available to a lot of people, and I hope that it gets a lot of traction around the world. It's a beautiful set of lyrics coming from a beautiful person with an amazing story, and I just wanted to thank you very much for being here with me today. And giving us all a unique opportunity, a unique way to celebrate Yom HaAtzma'ut. So I wish you well in your future endeavors, Molly, and I wish everyone good health, safety, a very happy Yom HaAtzma'ut to everyone watching, and looking forward to celebrating with everyone many other occasions as well. Thanks so much, Molly.
Thank you, Cantor, and I'll see you next year.
Perfect.
In person.
I look forward to it.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
להתראות.